Okay, hello everybody, welcome. It's another jet vlog. It is May 1st. I had a nice kind of picture for a Picasso in my May 1st page-a-day calendar. So very colorful, very nice way to start off the month of May. It's gorgeous weather in Japan. I think I made a video about it recently. It's just wonderful outside and it's 5:15. I'm about to go home. But I thought I'd quickly film this and post it up for you guys tonight, start off the month of May. Basically what I have is I have a document that a jet candidate, a jet applicant, was nice enough to type up quite extensively and send me, and I kind of put off using it because Jet sort of wants there to be a mystery surrounding the interview process, even though there's lots of websites out there that talk about it. I've made videos about it, etc., etc. They really don't want you to just disclose everything that happens. So during the interview season, as it were, and sort of back in January and February, I withheld talking about this, but now it's over and people are starting to find out about their placements, where they're going. If they were shortlisted, May is generally the month where you start to find out where you're going to end up in Japan. So good luck. I hope you get somewhere that you wanted or somewhere close to where you wanted. But to be honest, as I've said many times, most jets make the best of wherever they're put. And I knew nothing about Shimane, I knew nothing about Taisha, I knew nothing about living in a rural area. I'd grown up in a big city all my life, but I ended up loving my small town and still love Shimane. So there you go, for what it's worth. Okay, so this jet, also the other reason that I'm keen to kind of share this information is this jet interviewed in England, in the UK, in London probably specifically, and obviously I never went through that situation. I interviewed and have interviewed other jets in America, and while it varies from city to city in America, I think it's basically the same model. In the UK it is a little bit different, and so I thought I'd share that. And please let me know if you interviewed in some place where we don't have a lot of representation on YouTube, Jamaica, South Africa, even Australia or New Zealand. Let me know, is this similar to your interview, etc., in the comments. Don't give away too much if you're going to leave a comment on YouTube, because obviously that's linked to your real name now and stuff. And there's still, if you're a current applicant. If you did this a long time ago or you're a current jet or whatever, then no worries, okay? All right, here we go. So he had an interview at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He arrived at 12:15 and signed in. There was an art exhibit like in the consulate or something about Japanese art, but he didn't even have a chance to look at it because other interview applicants started to arrive and they were just chatting, which is nice. He's not sure if someone was watching them. People are often worried, like, are they watching me every moment? I mean, certainly the first impression you make, what clothes you're wearing, do you arrive on time, do you seem flustered when you arrive, etc., etc. All this makes an impression. But there's a caveat to any of this, which is, what's the weather doing outside? Is it raining? Is it snowing? How far away did you come from? Did you drive? Did you get on public transport? Yada, yada, yada. So, anyway. But no, I mean, there is somebody in the lobby that is sort of like in charge of maybe that jet office who doesn't partake in the interviews because they're too busy getting people in and out and stuff. And they are sort of watching, but they don't really have a lot of say in who goes on to the next step. The people, the three-person panel or the two-person panel that you interview with really gets that recommendation, that vote. At the end of the day. All right, so he said that a man came over at around 12:30. His interview was at 1 o'clock, and he gave him a rundown of some do's and don'ts. He basically said, like when you're sitting outside your room waiting to go in, don't, be chatting down the hall with the other interviewees, just kind of focus on yourself, etc. He then walked us to a room for a 5-minute English grammar test. Now this is something they do in the UK. I'd be interested to know if they do it in other countries. They don't do it in America, at least as far as I know. If that's changed America interview people, please let me know. He said that some of them he wasn't, he wasn't unprepared. He knew it was coming, but he didn't think it would be very difficult. And he said actually some of the questions were quite difficult. Obviously you're not allowed to use any references. You're not allowed to use your smartphone or anything. He says from memory we had to correct some mistakes in some sentences, adding punctuation, correcting the spelling of beginning or quite, occasionally, fixing bad grammar, etc. Explain the difference between she must have gone to the park and she should have gone to the park. Okay, that's pretty easy. 3. Choose the correct words to fill in several blank spaces. The difference between affect with an E and affect with an A. Ambiguous, ambivalent. Appraise, apprise. Assure, ensure, insure. Okay, so there you go. I think that's good, some of you are not English majors. I wasn't even an English major, but I was a social sciences major, a history major, so I wrote a lot in college. Certainly some jets, especially if you're coming from the sciences, this might be a little, cold water in your system. A shock, as it were. Like, whoa, grammar. Trust me though, if you end up teaching in an elementary school or even a junior high school, you won't really be forced to worry about that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is only going to come up if you end up teaching at a high school. All right, choose the odd word out from blocks of 4. So there's 4 words, which one doesn't fit in with the others type of thing. And he said time ran out on him before he actually finished the final question. All right, so be prepared for that if you're in the UK. So he said after this, so it's kind of a group, we were passed over to a former jet for a question and answers. There was a guy standing behind them taking notes, so at this point they were being observed. There was a jet DVD playing on mute in the background, but they didn't mention it. I think I'm on one of the jet DVDs, or at least I was for many years. I'm sure they've made new versions. And people would often say, "Oh, there's Jason," when they were watching. I don't know. I sent some pictures in at one point for a jet calendar contest or something, and they must use one in the video. Let's see. Some of her answers. Oh, he was saying when they asked her questions, the former jet, some of her answers actually shocked me, as she said that she had no strong reason to apply to jet and doesn't plan on returning to Japan. Or is this another interviewer? No, this was the person answering the questions. So interesting. He's wondering if it's a psychological ploy. All right. Outside the interview room, we were given a full list of strange instructions, such as don't try to close the door behind you when you walk in the room. Stand beside the fire extinguisher when you leave until someone comes to get you. Real strict rules. It's not that bad in LA, at least, where I did some interviewing and I was interviewed. Certainly there was like a chair outside the room and you were supposed to sit in the chair and wait, and then somebody would come and open the door and say, "Okay, please come in now." And you would walk in and there would be a chair for you to sit in. The big question a lot of people often ask is, should you shake hands? It's really up to you and what you're comfortable with. Please don't bow and try to be Japanese. That you don't need to do that. It's again, is it men behind the desk? Is it women? If you're a man, how do you feel about shaking the hand of a woman? Blah, 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 blah. I waited until the end and then kind of shook hands like, "Oh, thanks, I enjoyed our talk," and then shook hands with the 3 people. I didn't do it at the beginning. I just stood there, I waited for a moment, they said, "Please be seated," and then I sat, and then we started talking. But that was me back in, 2003. But some of this etiquette obviously doesn't change. Anyway, so, follow the rules, I guess, along the way. But, again, ESID, this whole thing is ESID. Every situation is different. Every jet will tell you about some guy that shows up to the interview in like a frickin' hoodie, and without shaving, and they're on the plane with them, 4 months later going to Japan. And you're like, how did you get in? So, I say dress nicely, blah, blah, blah. And, you've watched my videos about the interview, and there's always exceptions. So, here we go. All right. He had two men on his panel, so I guess in England they use two people. In America they generally use three. He said one was British and one was Japanese. They seemed nice, but I wouldn't say they tried to make me feel particularly at ease. Here are some of the questions they asked him. Okay, so specific questions from the 2014 interviews. Why JET? Okay, why did you apply to JET, basically? Your application talked about, some specific thing. Could you tell us some more? Okay, so you have to elaborate. In his specific case, it talked about how he saw a Japanese person for the first time. A follow-up question was, how did you know this person was Japanese? So, be prepared to, have a good, the Japanese person asked this, how did you know when you were a young person that this person was Japanese, And so you have to have a good answer, for stuff that you write in your essay and in your application, you really need to know your own material really well. It says that they responded to his application by saying it's clear you have a passion for Asian culture, you spent time in China. What do you think are some of the differences between China and Japan? So I think that's a very legitimate question. But they kind of, sidetracked him a little bit and said, well, it sounds like, you'd really like this if the JET program were actually in China. Would you rather go back to China than Japan? So you've got to kind of then steer it back and go, oh no, I'm really keen, on Japan, etc. Why did you choose where he wants to be placed? Nantoka Prefecture, I won't say where. And he said, this was actually my third choice. So he just said, he knows the big city in the prefecture and is interested in some of the local culture. Tell us about your teaching experience. So again, he's elaborating on something he's written in his application. He spent a year in France, I guess, working with students, maybe teaching French students English. Talk about a lesson plan that worked really well for you. Okay, so he had to kind of have something in mind. They commented, you talk really quickly. How would you talk in a class of Japanese students? So this is good. You've got to remember, I think, to talk in a very moderate, well-paced, very clear voice. They asked me the same thing to do a mock lesson, and I wasn't, back when I interviewed, there was no YouTube. I wasn't prepared necessarily, and they said, Jason, pick a holiday. And I've told this story in other videos, but basically, instead of picking something easy, Halloween with masks and candy, great for kids. Christmas, Santa, presents, great for kids. I picked the 4th of July, okay, and started to talk about the Constitution. Be careful and just, be composed, but make sure you're not talking so fast about everything okay, because you've got to remember that, especially if you do a mock lesson like I had to do, that you then really think, okay, my audience is 7 to 10-year-old Japanese students. I need to slow down, pick my words carefully, etc. You're from Northern Ireland. How is that different from England? What's so good about it? So they wanted him to kind of differentiate between his culture and England, because in Japan, everybody thinks it's just England. They're not so hip to Wales and Scotland and Ireland and what the difference is. So it's good to be able to discuss that. Some specific questions about his application I won't go into. He talked a little bit more about his hometown. And at the end they said, is there anything you wish we'd asked you? Do you have a question for us, kind of a prompt? Is there something that you wanted to know about, type of thing? But that's kind of awkwardly worded. He said he asked that they wished that he had asked them more about his personality, because he feels like his independent yet polite, flexible nature makes him a perfect candidate. So that's a good way to turn around something that's a little awkward and make it a positive. Alright, he said it lasted about 15 minutes, and in fact, I want this video to last 15 minutes, so I'm going to stop right here. That's a lot of information. Great. I want to applaud this guy. I'm not going to say his name. Thank you so much for sending this document in. If you have more questions about the interview, go check out my playlist, and more videos in May coming up. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.